pretending to be actually busy writing something down, even though I wasn't. I'm the wrong hero. Now, you've heard of old saws and ancient wisdom. Well, here tonight I am going to offer to you modern wisdom and new saws, which just happens to be the title of this presentation, New Saws. Now, as we all know, a cliche is just a senile fact. Actually, I'm probably taking a lot for granted here because we perhaps don't all know this. At least, not all adults know this. For that matter, virtually nobody knows this, okay? Get on my back. Anyhow, it is my belief that a cliche, after all is said and done, is just a senile fact. And I'm going to give you some of the ancient wisdom of the ancients. I mean, it would be kind of foolish to give you the ancient wisdom of the moderns now, wouldn't it? And I hope you respond favorably to this. Well, a fool in a hurry drinks tea with a fork, and if I hear any more talk about my tea drinking style, I'm going to stick that fork where the sun don't shine, partner. It is my belief that editorial cartoons are the hieroglyphics of treason. That's pretty abstruse. I'm going to try not to be quite so abstruse for the remainder of this presentation. You know, people accuse me of all sorts of dreadful things, but I swear I never laid a finger on her. It was bigger and thicker than a finger. Only marginally, perhaps, but nevertheless. Now, if the triangles had a god, he'd be a real square from Squaresville, Daddy-o. In the land of the blind, the guy who corners the market in smoked eyeglasses will make a killing. You know, I'm the kind of guy, if you give me a grin, I'll take a smile. I wept when I was born, and now I cry every day because it's the only time I wash my face. I'm planning to make a lot of money selling air, but I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. Nobody will lend his roommate $20, but everybody will tell him what an idiot he is for squandering his money. Remember, whenever you spend extravagant amounts of money on yourself, it's called treating yourself. Whereas if anybody else does the same thing, it's called squandering one's money. Selling one's patrimony for a bowl of pottage, whatever the hell that is. Has anybody ever really explained to my satisfaction what pottage is exactly? Okay, it's supposed to be some sort of stew, right? Why don't you just come out and say it's stew, all right? He sold his birthright for a can of Dinty Moore beef stew, and it was even expired. The date on it was like May 4th, 1994. And what a jerk, right? I mean, you think at least he'd hold out for corned beef hash or something, right? Maybe with a little egg on it. That's great, you know. Arteriosclerosis express here. Well, I am never ashamed to accept a tip, even from people with lots of money. Now, I took a tip straight from the horse's mouth, but it was all wet and slimy, and my girlfriend wouldn't let me bring it into the house, so that didn't do me a whole lot of good. Now, the wise must be respected, even when the advice they give dates from the horse and buggy days, as it so often does. A woman's advice may be of little value, but he who does not accept it is obviously not married. here is my prescription for success. To succeed, consult 3 old people and have them contribute $20,000 each. That's a good amount of money for a startup venture. The young should be taught, the old should be honored, and those in the middle ought to get a break on their taxes, but there's the deficit to consider, so the answer will probably be no, at least for this foreseeable future. Now, do not ridicule the thin-bearded one, especially if she is your buddy's girlfriend. A man who cannot tolerate small ills is probably, at the very least, a distant relative of mine, for I am the wrong hero. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, but wait a minute, let's back up here a second. People who live in glass houses, why? Why? So burglars can window shop? So they can look at the wall and shave? Or is this so the neighbors can hold up scorecards on a Saturday night while they're fucking, 9, 9.1, 10, I don't know. I say unto you, the ox that had its tail cut off went into business selling oxtail soup. And he made quite a tidy little fortune, too. So, you see, it pays to look on the bright side. Of course, I like to look on the bright side, so I stared at the sun for about 7 hours, and, well, you know the rest. Is it necessary to add acid to the lemon? Well, if so, this is obviously a job that calls for Ken Kesey. The man with a sour face shouldn't open up a shop unless it be a sour lemonade shop. And where's the money in that? Unless, of course, you can get Ken Kesey to consult with you on the proper mix of ingredients. Cold rice and cold tea are bearable, but cold fast food belongs in the dumpster. To ask is no sin, and to be refused is par for the course. If a man's heart be impure, he'd better not try to sell it on the open market, or the FDA will be after him toot sweet. If I die, I forgive you. If I recover, you're looking at the world's biggest negligence suit, Pally. Now, if you would call the dog to you, do not carry a stick unless it is the world's biggest Slim Jim. The sparrow says, I did not eat, therefore the parrot should not eat. And the parrot said, I don't appreciate that talking sparrow horning in on my act. There is no medicine to cure hatred, but there's plenty of prescription drugs that might make me willing to spend a little more time with you. It is better to look from the mountain than from the dungeon, unless, of course, the dungeon bit is a paying gig. Then it's all the same. When the big bells ring, the little bells are not heard, which is just as well because I've already got a splitting headache. He who does not know how to serve will probably be my waiter the next time I eat out. Beauty is only skin deep. And if you don't believe that, I'll flay you alive, you concerned whippersnapper. Whatever is pleasing to anyone, that is beautiful for him. And I've got a bridge I'd like to sell him if you'll introduce me to him. Learning is the beauty of the deformed. And methinks I better get a better paying gig. In times of great strife and travail, I like to say 5 simple words. These 5 simple words get me through. And they are, Lord, give me patience. Now! A chicken with beautiful plumage does not sit in a corner unless it's in a corner of my roasting pan, at which point I had better damn well taken off all that beautiful plumage, or I'm going to have me one scorched bird. Every time I take a bite out of it, I'll end up with a mouthful of feathers. If begging should unfortunately be your lot, you might as well get a job writing grant proposals. It is little honor for the lion to seize the mouse, unless he's working for the cat on a commission basis, plus a guaranteed salary. This is ancient and very wise wisdom, but I think it is thoroughly applicable to the modern day. In other words, it is a new saw. Make thyself a sheep, and the wolf is ready. And the way you can tell that is that the wolf's recipe book is open to the chapter on mint jelly. I'll be right back. I've got to answer this. Well, that was good. I needed a break anyway. Well, to continue with this great wisdom which I have accumulated over the course of several hours or minutes, condemn a man within his hearing, praise him when he's away. Now, there's a real prescription for a black eye and maybe a hearty kick in the keister to boot. Don't believe everything you hear, nor tell all you know. At least, not in volume 1. Save it for the sequel. Before you beat the dog, learn the name of his master. If the dog's master's name is Mr. Cat, then you're golden. Beat away. Measure 40 times, cut once, and people will assume you're a member of the Carpenters Union and you're making $30 an hour. Still waters run deep. Of course, that's a pretty good description of a toilet, isn't it? Now, I will give you a check for $20 if you promise not to cash it. With my luck, it would bounce, and I'd have to write a $20 check for the service fee, and that would bounce too, and before too long, I'd be in chapter 11. I gotta get this phone, it keeps ringing. Hello, I'm back. He is so stingy that if he shared his drugs with you, it would be one molecule at a time. That's not really a new saw, but I thought I'd throw it in. Look the other way when the girl at the tea house smiles. For the ones at the gin mill tend to be a little less inhibited, if you know what I'm getting at. By whom is food renounced? for fear of indigestion, except maybe employees of fast food establishments. Where there is no shame, there is no honor. But then again, you know I'm talking either about Hollywood or Washington, D.C., so let's cut the crap and drop the charade already, huh? The crow does not roost with the phoenix. But if he ever does, look the following day for fricasseed crow on the menu of the Phoenix Cafe. If it is difficult to know a man, find out with whom he associates. You will then know him. Unless, of course, he's some kind of hermit. Then you'll be cramping his chosen lifestyle big time. A good archer is known not by his arrows, but by his aim. Especially after he plants one in your buttocks, lardass. He shall reap hemp who sows hemp, and beans who sows beans. But let's get back to the guy who sows hemp for a minute, and how to get in touch with him come reaping time. If and when we're planted and nothing grew, but that's okay because I got a fat subsidy from the Department of Agriculture that year for growing nothing. The sky is the same color wherever you go, unless you're in Los Angeles during a smog alert, or on a rocket to the sun, or camping out in Biosphere 2 for the duration. What is impossible to change is best to forget. Unless we're talking about a squirming baby who has soiled itself and is screaming its head off. Dead men tell no tales, unless, of course, you have a degree in forensic pathology. Happiness and sorrow revolve like a disc, which somehow reminds me of a Brian Wilson solo album I once owned. He that killeth when he is drunk is hanged when he is sober, unless he goeth out and getteth himself a high-priced lawyer who getteth him off due to diminished capacity on 10 years probation and a hefty fine and maybe some community service after a stint in the Betty Ford Center. A fool and his money should come and talk to me. At 20, a man will be a peacock. At 30, a lion. At 40, a camel. At 50, a serpent. At 60, a dog. At 70, a monkey. And at 80, if he follows my financial plan, at 80, a man will be a multi-millionaire. Truly, the best morsels are never given to a beggar. Actually, usually, the IRS gets them. A Persian proverb: he who lends a book, one of his hands should be cut off. He who returns a book, both of his hands should be cut off. Needless to say, there aren't very many public libraries in Persia. A German proverb: talent is born in silence, but character is born in the struggle of life. As for TV celebrities, nobody really knows where they come from. He that sits with his back to a draft sits with his face to a coffin. Unless, of course, we're talking about draft beer. In which case, if he sits with his back to it too long, in my presence, it might not be there once he turns around. If envy would burn, there would be no use of wood. And if wishes were fishes, beggars would die of mercury poisoning. Through mistakes, one becomes wise. But he who makes excuses accuses himself. I'm telling you, you just can't win, can you? Wink at small faults, for you have great ones yourself, like that hideously patronizing wink of yours. He laughs best who laughs last. And there he is, laughing when there's important work to be done. The young talk about what they are doing, the old about what they have done, fools about what they plan to do, and movie stars on late-night talk shows talk about the clip from their latest movie, which hits the theaters Friday. It is easier for a camel to jump over a pit than for the stupid to grasp what you say, whatever the hell that means. An Indian proverb: it is foolish to hold a candle before the sun, or turn a somerset before a monkey. But it sure beats working for a living. Greek proverb: the frog wanted to be an ox and swelled up until he burst. And it's a real shame I couldn't get that on video. One cannot possibly bake bread for the whole world. But even if you tried, it would require a sifter the size of the moon. And I suppose you'd have to bake it in the sun at 200 million degrees for 1 nanosecond or until brown. Evil people know one another. And what's more, every now and then they run into each other at the supermarket and exchange recipes. Old habits are iron shirts. But with iron shirts, you can never use too much starch, and you can clean them with a scouring pad. So what's your beef, Mr. Chronic Complainer? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. But what I need to know is, what kind of fruit keeps the policeman away? Grinding one's teeth does not fill one's belly. Neither does eating a whole roll of Tums, which is pretty much the same thing. A hungry monkey will not dance, and a scalded cat will run away from cold milk. Hey, what kind of nightmare world is this anyway? You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, but then again, what kind of nut walks around with a pocketbook that smells like bacon, huh? Why? Why? Make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Why? Is this so you can have all the stray dogs in town trailing in your wake? What's this for? To piss off Muslims? What are you, the poster boy for the other white meat? Silk purse out of a sow's ear, indeed. You can't ring the bell and at the same time walk in the procession. Unless, of course, you got one of those Rube Goldberg type contraptions in the bell tower there that you can activate by a remote control. Rolling stones gather no moss. But then again, moss isn't exactly selling like hotcakes around these parts. It's the quiet people that do all the work. And if we could just get them to do it for nothing, we'd have it made, wouldn't we? You know, the heckler is always the guy who got in on a complimentary ticket or sneaked in through the side door. Swift gratitude is the sweetest, but a swift kick is more likely to be on the agenda. To spare the ravening leopard is an act of injustice to the sheep. And besides, I'm hungry. Where's my leopard stew with a side order of lamb chops? Come on, snap it up, toot sweet. Laws, like the spider's web, catch the fly and let the hawk go free. Though what the hawk was doing poking around in a spider's web would probably make a pretty good expose for 60 minutes. Who travels for love finds 1,000 miles only 1 mile. Which is great, especially if you can apply that to your frequent flyer program. A penny saved is a penny earned. And by that reasoning, that change jar of yours gathering dust in the closet makes you a wealthy man. All that glitters is not gold. For that matter, all that glitters is not God. But try telling that to a New Age mystic or a psychedelic gulping tribal shaman. If you want to be Pope, you can think of nothing else, especially if you're not even Catholic. Half a loaf is better than none, except you can have the stale part where the air hit it, because I don't really want it. Don't count the days of a month which may never belong to you. But then again, don't be surprised when you find it difficult to make dental appointments. The house of pride is usually empty, and I hear the expensive security system and alarm warning systems are a fake, and you can just walk right in there and take whatever you want at the house of pride. If two men quarrel, even their dogs will have a difference. So, even if they make up, at least we'll get a good dog fight out of it. Anyone can walk on water. Just wait until it freezes over. Anyone can predict when this presentation will be over. Just wait until hell freezes over. It has most truly been said that God is in the details. And you know something? I wish he'd get out of there. He's starting to give me the whim-whams. You know, you can't love God unless God loves himself. A man's folly ought to be his greatest secret. Unfortunately, you're seeing it in action. Keep no secrets from your doctor or lawyer unless you're dating their underage teenage daughters. Then you might want to think twice about flapping your lips, ratchet jaw. The spoken word belongs half to him who speaks and half to him who hears. And that doesn't leave much of a percentage for the fellow who actually cooks up all the really good jokes. Many have suffered for talking. None ever suffered for keeping silent, except maybe poor old Giles Corey, who was pressed to death during the Salem witch trials for refusing to either deny or affirm his guilt. In West Africa, there is a proverb: why keep on talking when we know you so well? That's a good question. Bye. No, I got more. Sorry. A blanket is not to be thrown away because of lice. There are plenty of chimps at the zoo who would very much appreciate a blanket teeming with these tasty morsels. Make hay while the sun shines. And I'll be laughing at you because I got an indoor job with benefits and 3 weeks of sick leave. The road of by and by leads to the house of never, where they'll be having a big nothing off sale someday. An Armenian proverb states, always tell the truth in the form of a joke. Hoarding in on my act again. Always tell the truth in the form of a joke, and failing that, lie. That's good advice to hand down to your kids, huh? Tell a lie on Saturday, and you'll be ashamed on Sunday. But by Tuesday, the profits will start rolling in, so who cares? He who laughs on Friday weeps on Sunday. And don't bother asking about Saturday, because to him, it's all just a blur. See that you are wise, but also learn how to appear ignorant, especially if a state trooper stops you for speeding and asks you if you know why he stopped you. An appropriate response is, gee, officer, I didn't know I was going that fast. An inappropriate response as to why did the state trooper pull you over, an inappropriate response is, well, let's see, either the donut shop was closed, or you're too cowardly to chase dangerous felons, and so you thought you'd harass honest citizens like me for a change. A word to the wise is enough. Of course, I've been sitting here for probably about 45 minutes, which should tell you something right there. The wise discourses of a poor man go for nothing. So, his foolish discourses must mean he owes you money. Repetition is the mother of knowledge. And if you didn't hear that the first time, you won't hear it the second time. Envy accomplishes nothing. And it doesn't look very good on a resume either. Lepers are always envious of those with simple sores, which sounds to me like an award-winning premise for a daytime talk show. And now on Ricky Lake, people with simple sores and the lepers who envy them. He who rides the chair is a man like those who carry it, although usually his ass is a whole lot bigger. If you take the wrong hat from a meeting, make sure it doesn't belong to a big man. And if there's a tag on it that states property of King Kong, then run for your life. When they asked the fish, "Have you news from the sea?" the fish replied, "I have much to say, but my mouth is full of water, so leave a message on my answering machine and I'll get right back to you." Everything passes. Everything perishes. Everything palls. Especially this presentation. No chicken will fall into the fire a second time, unless, of course, it's my roasting pan. When fools make mistakes, they lay the blame on Providence. And when Providence makes mistakes, they lay the blame on the governor of Rhode Island. The drum is boisterous, to no avail. There is nothing in it. And the same is usually true of the head of the man who plays the drum. You ever talk to a drummer? They make football players sound as eloquent as Winston Churchill during the Battle of Britain, if you know what I mean. By the time the fool has learned the game, the players have dispersed. But at least the fool gets to polish off all the toothsome morsels and tasty snacks left behind by the others. So the question is, who's really the fool here? To sing to the deaf, to talk with the dumb, and to dance for the blind are three foolish things. But the person who does them will probably be a future recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts grant, provided they send in their proposal before the cutoff date. Never send a chicken to bring home a fox, unless you're fixing on dining on roast fox stuffed with masticated poultry. Then you'd probably be saving yourself a hell of a lot of prep time. He is wise that can make a friend of a foe. And usually, he is also very well to do. Boast to a stranger, complain only to your friends, and you'll be well on your way to being regarded as the neighborhood idiot. You cannot fill your belly by painting pictures of bread. Though, if you can paint a picture of a $100 bill, you might see your picture hanging in post offices. Though the ant works its heart out, it can never make honey. Though, now that I think of it, honey would be kind of wasted on the ant, who is supposed to be on a diet. If your eyes are bigger than your stomach, either you're the world's weirdest cyclops or you're some kind of genetic mutation, and either way, I'm out of here, Chumley. A good laugh and a long sleep are the best cures in the doctor's book. So stay tuned, because you might at least be in for a long sleep before I'm done. Now that I put my hand to my head, I see there is no hat. As a matter of fact, Folks say I'd lose my head altogether if it wasn't bolted on. It's a bad bridge that's shorter than its stream. But at least some hard-working politician got a juicy kickback out of it. You cannot get butter by churning water, though there are certain brands of diet margarine now on the market which utilize that process. Better to beg than to steal. Better to work than to beg. But better still to have a cushy, no-show government job and plenty of seniority to boot. Don't judge a book by its cover, and be advised that if the cover is torn off and you buy the book anyway, then you are guilty of trafficking in stolen property. Love is blind, and even liking somebody as a friend sometimes requires corrective lenses. If you live in my heart, you live rent-free. If you live in my heart, you live rent-free. Though there's a yearly maintenance fee and a security deposit involved. He who tells his wife all is but newly married, and probably also a pretty boring guy to boot, I'll betcha. He who has not tasted bitter knows not what sweet is, although there's certain artificial sweeteners out there where you get a heaping helping of both. Advise and counsel him. If he does not listen, let adversity teach him. If that still doesn't do it, move away and leave no forwarding address. Fortune and misfortune dwell in the same courtyard, and what with all the partying and drunken brawling and sobbing that goes on down there, I can't get one wink of shut-eye. He that has no money has no friends, though a guy with a line of credit and a sparkling personality can put on a pretty good front, at least until the bill collectors come a-knocking. A castle offered for a dinar is dear when you have no dinar. But a dinner at White Castle you can get by collecting empty beer and soda cans and cashing them in for the 5 cents deposit. Hair by hair, you may pluck out the whole beard. And just think of the money you'll be saving on razors and depilatories. Poverty is a pain, but not a disgrace, unless you admit it in front of a crowd who fails to mistake it for a sly form of boasting. A man that will fight may find a cudgel in every hedge, in which case he'd be pretty foolish to go out and buy one now, wouldn't he? It is only when the cold season comes that we know the pine and cypress to be evergreens, which is their bad luck, because then we cut them down and make Christmas trees out of them. And then, sometime around January 1st, January 6th, 7th, they end up on the sidewalk outside for the trash collector to come and pick up, and, well, it's just a pity, that's all. The universe is a thought from God, but the way things have been going leads me to suspect that the old boy's been getting kind of absent-minded lately. You know all the symptoms. Leaving the lights on over in Alpha Centauri, forgetting to blow out the supernova at night, Non-injury is the highest religion. At least, it sure beats sacrificing your firstborn to the angry volcano god, or putting a goat's head in a pentagram to appease Mephistopheles. Since my house must be burned, I may as well warm myself at it. And what care I if the authorities misinterpret my strange behavior and use it as a pretext to accuse me of arson, just so long as I have a hefty insurance settlement clenched in my hot little fist. If only one knows it, it is secret. If two knows it, it is public. If three know it, and it's particularly juicy, it'll be on hard copy the following night. Truly, not speech, but facts convince. But a good fart can drive everybody out of the room. Where there is a surfeit of words, there is a famine of intelligence. And if you're still tuned in, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. To quarrel with a man of good speech is better than to converse with a man of rude address. Although, usually when I get into an argument, it's with some guy whose knuckles scrape the ground, who lacks opposable thumbs, who has no neck, and whose every other grunt is a gurgled oath. Talking is easy. Action is difficult. And televangelism is still very lucrative from a fundraising perspective. He whose virtue exceeds his talents is a superior man. He whose talents exceed his virtues is an inferior man. And he who has neither talent nor virtue is probably working for the government in an appointed position. When the fox preaches, look to your geese. And incidentally, try to catch it on your camcorder because, just in case America's Funniest Home Videos is interested. Never shave a corpse alone, for fear your hand would slip and you'd be accused of murder. Although, to tell you the truth, personally, I'd rather cool my heels on death row for all eternity than have a job shaving corpses for a living. Just one man's opinion. If the teacher be corrupt, the world will be corrupt. But at least you'll maybe get a good reference out of them. Ask your purse what you should buy. And if a moth flutters out, it's time to whip out your credit card, Chief. Strike while the iron is hot. It beats having your nipples pierced. The early bird gets the worm, but the bird with the money can buy night crawlers from a convenient roadside stand any time of day or night. Never put off till tomorrow what you can do today, unless you speculate in derivatives for a brokerage firm. On a long journey, even a straw weighs heavy. But you better hang on to it anyway, because you never know who might offer you a frosty drink from a filth-encrusted can. Then, listen to me, brother, you're going to need that straw. Truth gives a short answer. Lies go round about. And commercials somehow manage to combine both. The wise man says, I am looking for truth. And the fool says, I have found truth. And the band Jesting Pilot is in the top 40 with their hit single, What is Truth? A lie has 7 variations. The truth None. And a good sex manual usually has at least 20 or 30. When a man is dead, there is no use in calling the doctor. But you might be visited by a ranting coroner who swears he's going to get to the bottom of this. A cat with gloves never catches mice, but at least it doesn't claw the upholstery. You ever try to put gloves on a cat? I'll tell you, man, it's like Scratch City. You know what I'm saying? It's like, here, kitty, kitty, here, kitty, kitty. Look, I got some nice gloves for you. A blind man sat behind a pile of stones and thought that nobody could see him. Nowadays, they would call that man a performance artist. An old proverb states, I'd make money if I could buy him for any price and sell him at his own. Of course, I'd make even more money if I weren't so gosh darn cynical all the time. Learn to handle a writing brush, and you'll never handle a begging bowl. Whoa, wait a minute. If I were you, I wouldn't throw away that begging bowl just yet. To say witty things is not always a sign of wisdom, but it sure beats watching the paint dry on a Saturday night. Wisdom is born. Stupidity is learned. Certs is two mints in one. Fools get things mixed up, and wise men straighten them out, which is also the basic plot of every sitcom episode ever made. They asked a bullfrog, "Why do you continually croak?" He replied, "I am enchanted with my voice." So, they put him in a Budweiser commercial, and he made a small fortune. The crow was killed by the storm. "He died by my curse," said the owl. And then the alligator, who had a degree in veterinary medicine, said that it was a combination of factors, including the fact that the crow was weakened by intestinal parasites and suffered from a lowered resistance due to lack of food, and the storm more or less came along and just polished him off, but he would have been dead pretty soon anyway. The alligator also took great pains to mention that the owl had absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. It is said that in the world there are 3 people who resemble you exactly. Hey, 3 people who resemble me exactly, huh? Yeah, sure, yeah. Now they can take the rap for the crimes that I commit, see? The sparrow, flying in the rear of the hawk, thinks the hawk is fleeing, and if somebody pulls the hawk's sleeve, we have the makings of a really cool clip to show on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Carrots improve your vision at night, just when you need it the most, when you're asleep. An apple cleans your teeth. Then again, so does a hand grenade. Everybody else always ruins it for a few assholes. I'm the wrong hero, and I may be on a roll, but that doesn't mean you have to butter me up. Dogs bark, the caravan goes on, and all of a sudden, I've got a terrific headache. As William Lloyd Garrison so eloquently stated, I will not bend, I will not equivocate, and I will be heard. For a good time, call 751-6969 and ask for Velma. Fight fire with fire, and they'll haul you off on an arson rap quicker than you can say Smokey the Bear. The capitalist is eager to sell a rope for himself to be hanged with. Plus, for a limited time only, you can also get new rafter trademark, perfect to hang rope from. Stool sold separately. Divide, and then divide again, just for the hell of it. Build a better mousetrap, and the world will beat a path to your door, although, now that you mention it, wouldn't it be quicker and easier to have construction workers do it? I'm so very sorry that you did not get your NEA grant. I guess now you'll have to work for a living. People are so unkind sometimes. I don't know who wrote that in here, but when I find them, well, that reminds me of what is perhaps the wisest piece of wisdom of all. Uniquely wise piece of wisdom. People who tell the truth are never very popular. So let's kill them. All three of them. I'm the wrong hero. I'm going to take a break, but I will be back shortly. Hopefully with still more new saws. Hi, I'm the wrong hero. Well, I've been digging around my archives and I came up with some more new saws for you. Academia is a grave and a shallow one. All in the Family, the television show All in the Family, is the honeymooners for bigots. The American Revolution was fought so that plantation owners could drink cheap tea. Americans like everything big, except big words. Anchovies are sardines with a pedigree. Anglicans pride themselves on being more sophisticated than Catholics. What a distinction. Anniversaries are celebrations of the beaten track. The Arabs invented zero. That's nothing. An artificial diamond is a carbon copy. Autism is a game that one can play. Azerbaijan is a country that only Iran could love. The ballet is basically aerobics for panty waists. A banjo is a fiddle for dolts. Beards are mustaches for people who can't understand the concept of too much of a good thing. Brandy is a villainous wine with all the good qualities burned out. Boston is a hamlet blown up to poster size. A bugle is a kazoo with delusions of grandeur. Canadian is an American strained through a Union Jack. Cancer is the competition. Cannibals show not only poor taste, but bad judgment. Carnivores wouldn't think twice to eat a vegetarian. Catfish are the garbage cans of the riverbed. The expression caveat emptor means A, your head is a giant sucker, and B, you have the IQ of a ceiling fan. Cerebral palsy is a mobster's brainy friend. Chaos is the norm. Cicero was a Roman Stoic and prosodist, now principally celebrated as Porky Pig's nephew. Cinderella is basically Frankenstein in drag. I wrote a book called Compulsive Reading. The New York Times called it a must-read. Cowboys are semi-literate bums of the Old West whose asinine exploits dominate our pitiful mythology. Democrats are children of a larger growth. Walt Disney was a man who invented a 6-foot rat, and now they worship him. A dollar is a paper penny. Driving is dull poetry. Elevators are movable living rooms formerly populated by chipper illiterates. Now they are sterile dumbwaiters for people too lazy to climb stairs. The English Channel is PBS. Exploration is territorial expropriation by people we like. The factory is a temple, and chances are the man who runs it is a Shriner. Fasting is trendy starvation. A Fig Newton is a Zwieback cookie stuffed with seedy crud. A man's garbage is his household dossier. Grunge music is A, the long-awaited hayseed dialectic to the black leather jacket stud, and B, Bay City Rollers recidivus. Hollywood movies are the ideas of the marketplace. Impressionism is myopia elevated to an art form. Billy Joel is Harry Chapin with all the conscience leached out. Johnny Appleseed was a great man, but his oatmeal tasted like hair grease. Juice blends are the lazy man's cornucopia. The 1960s television humor show Laugh-In was basically psychedelia for drunks. The moon is a giant ovary, which is why we shoot rockets at it. Novels are comic books for adults. And The New Republic is a comic book for policy wonks. Opera is a substitute for sex. H. Ross Perot is Kilroy. Photocopies are electronically generated graven images. Pornography is one man's meat. Republicans are premature grandparents. Satire attempts poetry where none exists. 99% of all statistics are wrong, including this one. The theater is church for people with money to burn. Venial sins are celestial summary offenses. The Vice President of the United States is the Rorschach blot of our dissatisfaction. And whales are blubbery ingrates who vomit ambergris on the world's oceans and who litter our beaches with their rotting carcasses. I'm the wrong hero. There will be more coming up, but for now, I'll be taking a break. Hi, I'm the wrong hero. And I thought you might be interested to know that I've done 5 shows in 3 days. Well, right now as we speak, there's a blizzard that's just finished wreaking its havoc. They call it the storm of the century. First there was OJ's trial of the century. Now it's the storm of the century. No matter what happens from now until the year 2000, it will probably have the century appended to it. Thus, the 1996 presidential campaign will be called the campaign of the century. And, you know, a new cough syrup will come out and they'll call it the cough syrup of the century. And this whole century business, it's starting to get to me. First of all, it's starting about maybe 3 years too early. And second of all, I don't believe that this was, in fact, the storm of the century. It was perhaps the 5th most intense storm of the century. Hardly beats the 2 blizzards which occurred in 1978, for starters, at least here in New England. Elsewhere, I don't know. I was here in 1978. I remember that blizzard. The National Guard closed off the roads. People were cross-country skiing down the street in Harvard Square. 2 young fellas took me in a ride in a taxi cab, not because they wanted to pick me up as a fare, but just because they felt like driving around in the snow. And they took me all the way up to Arlington, and I told them, oh, actually, I was just going to Harvard Square. So they obligingly turned around and drove all the way back. It's nice how people get together and help one another in a blizzard. And in fact, the people who have been booking me for these shows have gotten together and helped me by booking me during the worst blizzard of the last 5 years at least. And well, it's the only time I can ever seem to get any paying gigs is when there's a blizzard and 5 people in the audience. But actually, I'm not complaining. Not at all. After all, a gig is a gig. Now, I'm the wrong hero, and some people call me the avatar of the moron zeitgeist. Now, some folks don't know what that means. Well, an avatar, I guess, is like the personification of a godly individual on earth. And the zeitgeist is the spirit of the times, and apparently the spirit of the times in these times is to talk about how it's nearly the end of the century. If I hear one more word about it being nearly the end of the century, I think I will scream. And if I hear one more comedian doing bad Star Trek impressions, I think I will throttle them. Let me get off the subject for just a minute. Why is it that anybody thinks they can be a comedian if they put together 5 minutes of lame, derivative television show impressions and all these, like, talk dirty a little bit? It really gets me. But I really shouldn't harp on this too much. I mean, I can't claim that comedy is the only thing I do. In fact, I can't claim sometimes, I think, in my more depressed moments, that comedy is even a thing that I do. Hi, I'm the wrong hero. And anyway, I like to refer to myself as the avatar of the moron zeitgeist. I am the wrong hero. Alcoholic, drug addict, easy guy to shop for around Christmas time. Just so you know. And, well, I suppose doing 5 shows in 3 days means it sort of constitutes my comeback tour. Well, the only problem with that is I never really was very famous, except in the 60s I had a novelty single called Heterosexual Truck Driving Man. And I never really went anywhere, except, of course, for the 15 years that I spent in a hyperbaric chamber. Anyway, I was not intended by destiny to be a mere clown whose sole purpose in life is to tickle the sores of a fickle mob. But, as I said before, a gig's a gig. I ain't any too choosy these days. Let me see if I can find something to drink here. Well, I should have thought of this. That's another thing that really gets me. People who say, you should have thought of that before you did it. What more childish thing could there possibly be than to say, well, you should have thought of that before you did it. Hey, Jack, if I had thought of it before I did it, then I guess I might not have done it at all, because I would have been sitting here twiddling my thumbs, frittering time away, thinking about it. I mean, that's the plot of Hamlet, basically, It's like, whoa, alas, poor Diet Coke. I knew him well. Anyway, when folks see a pretty girl walking down the street, they go, whoa, hey, get a load of that action. But when they see the wrong hero walking down the street, they say, security, security, please report immediately to Sector 7. Well, anyway, some people have asked, wrong hero, why do you wear the dress and the mask? And I respond, well, if the jokes are funny, then I am the greatest comedian of my generation. And if the jokes suck, well, then I guess I'm a performance artist. Well, anyway, I don't know, I've probably done this joke about 5 or 6 times just in the last 3 days alone. But I'm going to do it again. Maybe I could spin off some new material from it. Who knows? See, this is a sort of casual, laid-back way that I operate, which ensures that I will forever be enshrined in the annals of mediocrity. Now, if I were really serious about this stuff, I'd be doing nothing else but 24 hours a day. But then again, it's kind of hard to eat and have a girlfriend and a place to live and a car and a credit card if all you do is work on the jokes 24 hours a day. Ooh boy. But I will say this about myself. I don't sit around watching television 24 hours a day trying to steal jokes from comedians who steal jokes from each other, so the whole thing is just one big mass of derivativeness. As a matter of fact, I got news for those comedians out there. Your day is past. I'm the wrong hero, and this is the new comedy. Already, in London, they have taken the example of the wrong hero, and they are doing what they call alternative comedy. Of course, nonconformists are really the biggest conformists of all within their little nonconformist regime. So we can look to see a time in which alternative comedy is every bit as cornball as, say, bad W.C. Fields impressions or bad Groucho Marx impressions, just to name 2 obvious landmarks. I really should save this for another week, and I probably will be discussing this somewhere down the line. But comedy really split off into two branches, and one branch just withered and died away, and the other one's still going strong with all of its sub-branches brachiating out, or brachiating out. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that word. Shouldn't use a word unless you know how to pronounce it. What have you been doing? Reading a book? Hey, come here, get on this. This guy thinks he's smart. He's reading a book. Well, sure beats roping doggies for a living partner. Anyway, there was the W.C. Fields branch, you know, this sort of avuncular, old, rummy, kind of semi-uncle figure, the ne'er-do-well, slick-talking con man, sort of fellow that's really into his own thing, doesn't really much care about what anybody else has to say, and pretty much just lives his life the way he wants to live it, as a alcoholic, obese, and thoroughly reprehensible character. And then there's the fast-talking Groucho Marx character. And every comedian, except maybe for Steve Wright and a few others, uses this approach to this day. The very same approach which was so cutting edge and novel in 1929, and they're still beating it to death nearly 70 years later. Yeah, it's the old, shot an elephant in my pajamas. What he was doing in my pajamas, I don't know. Yeah, that sort of thing. That old fast-talking, you don't even have to speak English, you could, hey, Ron Roberto, Superior Imported Rum, distilled in the West Indies, product of the Virgin Islands. Imported and bottled by Ron Roberto Rum Company, Somerville, Massachusetts. Funny thing happened to me, drinking Ron Roberto Superior, imported rum, light and rare, with 6 gold medals to its credit. I got drunk. Anyway, it branched out like that, and of course there's all these sub-branches. Woody Allen, the neurotic, quivering, hates to be on stage kind of comedian. Steve Wright sort of branched off from that to a certain degree, this whole deadpan thing. Deadpan is really subtle, people don't get it, really. That's why I suppose that it's not really a very big thing. And, and then you had Lenny Bruce, too. He sort of branches off from the Groucho Marx thing. But it's this sort of nasal, high-pitched, and sniggeringly dirty-minded, but highly moral, as all satirists must be, sort of presentation, hey, now take it, see? Now what I want to tell you, here's what I'm laying down. I used to have whole chunks of Lenny Bruce committed to memory. He was my idol. And then, you got the Rodney Dangerfield. Now, he's actually kind of a throwback to the old W.C. Fields persona comedy. And, something of respect. So you can just see W.C. Fields doing it in virtually the same way. And, Steve Martin, this sort of smart, slick, postmodernist type of comedy. Steve Martin was voted by his peers as the greatest comedian of the last 20 years. Well, okay, I read his book, Cruel Shoes. Okay, it came out 17 years later, but geez, it sounds an awful lot like stuff he wrote down while he was in the bathroom and decided to just throw a book together with some photographs of him in action. It's more like an icon than it is an actual book of humor. And yet, the jacket copy said it's destined to become one of the humorous classics. I don't know about that. I bought my copy for 20 cents at the Cambridge Public Library. They have this big truck and they sell all their old books. But don't be dumb and buy these books and then try to sell them to book dealers because they won't buy them. Not unless there's something incredibly rare. And you have to have a really sharp eye, like me, to find out the stuff that's really worth having, even in a damaged former library copy. Like I got this book called Salt by Frank Norris's brother. I'll bet you that's worth a pretty penny. Well, first I intend to read it, since it's the story of my life. Guy goes to boarding school, military school, college. He's reasonably well-to-do, but then his mother dies and he's left broke, and he sort of sinks in moral status, and takes this job with a bunch of crooks, and he marries this woman who sort of clings to him, and he doesn't grow at all as an individual. That's what we're getting at. But then his wife dies. He finds a good woman, and he decides to live in a boarding house or something and sort of hang out with these families, and they teach him the virtues of familial togetherness. And he becomes a good person and educated in being a human being. Well, I'll bet you that's worth something, maybe. It's one of those obscure classics of American literature that only people who are interested in American literature seem to know about. And, well, I mean, I thought I knew everything, but no, there's this book comes along. I don't know jack shit about it. All of a sudden, hey, oh, great, it's on the agenda now. Well, anyway, I was saying that I've been doing this joke over and over, and I thought maybe I'd try to do it again and improvise some off of it. You know, I really wish I could say nice things about Billy Crystal. I mean, he tries so hard, and that movie of his, what was it, Mr. Saturday Night? It was sort of like Ralph Bakshi's American Pop, and then it presented this central figure, which is an amalgam of all the great comedians of the 20th century. But, you know George Burns with the cigar, Uncle Milty with the TV show, and but somehow it just doesn't wash. You don't really care about this person. And I think that is the central flaw of Billy Crystal's movie. And then in the video version, he shows outtakes at the end of it. And to my mind, the outtakes are a lot funnier than anything in the movie. Well, it just goes to show. And what is this nasty habit that television producers have of creating filler by like showing supposed outtakes from the show, which in fact probably 9 times out of 10 were deliberate, so they'd have outtakes to show, which were humorous. And, I mean, how many clips of people cracking up with laughter at their own cleverness or that of their script writers instead of holding that deadpan? How much of that can you take, huh? And, another thing that really bothers me, it's something I call the cheapo montage. Now, I saw this movie, Beethoven, about this gigantic St. Bernard, and they had this cheapo montage with Rollover Beethoven as the soundtrack and various clips of the lovable but clumsy St. Bernard getting into all sorts of mischief. Actually, that cheapo montage was actually kind of funny, but the cheapo montages you see elsewhere, they're so cheesy, and the only show that seems to recognize just how cheesy these cheapo montages are is Married with Children. And I think they do it at least once an episode. I haven't watched the show lately. It's sort of gone downhill. I mean, the premise was great. Then they got that new guy in instead of Marcy's old husband. They got this new guy. Well, he's okay, but somehow the show lost something, some intrinsic sleaziness that really made it kind of work. And the thing is, they were doing some rich bashing for a while. They were saying, let's kick some rich butt. They did that maybe 2, 3 times, and they dropped the idea. Oh, no, I don't think we should do that. Mr. Murdoch might not like it. So instead, they have this sort of fake PC, political correctness type of stuff. Now, I'm all for political correctness. I think that as long as you don't get too strident about it, if you're politically correct, you're basically on the side of the angels. But not when it's used in a cheap and insincere way to curry favor. Then it's almost as bad as the racism it is supposedly attempting to ameliorate, if not wholly eradicate. Because then it's tokenism, really, in the worst sense of the word, by sort of pandering to a special interest constituency, you're at the same time denying them equality. I mean, this argument has been made many times before. This is not really the time or the place to get into it. But anyway, I did think that I would mention how much it bothers me. But no, the real cheapo montages that I'm talking about are generally to be found on shows like Baywatch or anything with the Olsen twins in it. It's like, the cute Olsen twins or the busty babes on Baywatch running across some beach or something, and this music playing in the background, and various high living, big fun type things going on. People in dune buggies laughing, drinking carbonated beverages. Yeah, it's so trite, and I can't stand it. It occurs to me that maybe it's just as well that I haven't become enormously successful and popular, because then people would be expecting me to do the jokes which got me to that stage in my career. And I don't even have patience doing the same joke 5 times. And if that's the way I feel, then how in the hell could I do the same joke, say, 20 times a month, 11 months a year? 220 times a year doing the same jokes over and over. I think that way would lie madness. I think that I would not be able to resist the impulse to tinker with the material. Jazz it up, goose it up, and then of course I'd totally ruin it, because it does take years to craft one joke to the point where it is so finely honed. Now, some guy told me a joke. Some poet at the Stone Soup. He came up to me and said, "I like to wash my dog. Usually, I like the spin cycle." And it's like, well, it's okay. If I'd thought of it, I might have tried it a couple of times. When it didn't get the laugh, which it definitely needs to get, then you drop it. Well, anyway, here's an example of a joke which almost always seems to work for me. And that is, I've lost my faith in science, and I've lost my faith in religion, and now I subscribe not to Scientific American. I used to subscribe to Scientific American, but now I subscribe to Superstitious Caveman. The first issue is dated January 9th, 1 million BC. It's got all these great articles in it, like fire, bad, sacrificing your firstborn to the angry volcano god, some do's and don'ts, Mesopotamia on 5 shekels a day, and, of course, are dinosaurs kosher? Now, let me stand right here. This might be torture for you. I'm under the gun here. I got to think of one new spin on that particular bit. Now, what could it possibly be? Okay, cavemen, dinosaurs, the earth in flux. I don't know. Let's see. Celebrity Pet of the Month, Dino. No, that's no good. Let's see. All right, I can't do it. I'm under the gun, and I can't do it. Well, anyway, that reminds me of another one of my most embarrassing moments. There I was, up on the cross, being crucified, and the Roman centurion offers me a sponge soaked in wine. And I have to admit that I am a recovering alcoholic. All this witty stuff I do, all this carefully scripted material, hey, maybe someday I should just throw the script out the window and wing it. Yeah, that's the way. That's the surefire way to oblivion. Straight down the toilet. It works in limited doses. You can extrapolate off of material you've already done. But it's a very interesting point, me being a recovering alcoholic and making a point of, saying this. Because I don't really think of myself as a recovering alcoholic. It's more like, I'm a guy used to drinking, and all of a sudden one day I decided, who needs it? I don't even like booze that much. I don't like hanging out in bars. I don't like the kind of people that hang out in bars. I don't like talking to people who are intoxicated. My mother was an alcoholic, and I'm in danger of being an alcoholic myself. My family is riddled with alcoholism and insanity on both sides, and I just don't need that heartache, and I need to lose some weight. That was the initial impulse, and of course I gained it all back and then some. I'm basically a very oral individual. Oh, how could we guess? So, I can't really think of any funny material about alcoholism that I haven't done before, And alcoholism, it used to be sort of like a nudge, wink, wink kind of situation. The old style comics, they'll do booze jokes, the funny drunk, the late Dean Martin, of course. Now, here's an interesting story about Dean Martin. He broke up with Jerry Lewis in 1956, which incidentally was the year before I was born. And he needed a new act. He didn't think he could make it on his musical ability alone. Although another interesting anecdote is that his young son was really, really into the Beatles, and he says to his kid, he's so tired of this 12-year-old yapping about the Beatles, he says, listen, Pally, I'm going to knock your little friends off the charts. And that he did with Everybody Loves Somebody. You know, it's like, everybody loves somebody. But anyway, he got his whole drunk act from some comedian or some comedy writer. And the comedy writer wasn't in it for the money. He just said, oh, just give me some silk ties from such and such a place, and I'll consider that payment enough. But Dean never followed through on the silk ties, you know. And I wonder if he knew that after he died, some jerk would be like bad-mouthing him about this. But really, that was a lousy thing for him to do. I mean, I'm sorry, and all. And, you know, he's from my neck of the woods, actually, Dean Martin. And the funny thing, and this has been observed about Jerry Lewis really was sort of left totally bereft when Dean Martin decided to no longer continue with their partnership. And in The Nutty Professor, he played both parts, that of himself and Dean Martin, as Buddy Love. And, oh man, I'll tell you, during the telethon, the Jerry Lewis telethon, people began referring to Jerry as Jerry Love. He's not just Jerry Lewis, he's Jerry Love. Boy, I'll tell you, if I started calling myself Jerry Love, I could make a quick fortune. I've considered calling myself by other names. I had a really good one, but I forgot it, but let's see. Hugo Boss and O.J. King. Those were two that I thought of that might be really good to like change my name to. But no, I ain't going to do it. Now, my mind is leaping in all sorts of directions. I don't know where all this outburst of unconnectedness is coming from. But has it ever occurred to you, or I mean, especially if you're in the comedy business, that the guys with the shittiest, lamest, most derivative acts are the ones who are the quickest to like laugh, you know, at your misfortune when your stuff doesn't work? There's this guy at AS220, it's called Mr. Misery. His whole act is lying on the floor, doing the morning ablutions while Elvis Costello sings Mr. Misery in the background. And this guy thinks he's really hot shit for some reason, you know? It's like, Christ, what is that, you know? It's like, oh, I think I'll waste 5 minutes of everybody's time. Yeah, I'm great. Yeah. I'm really letting the bile out now, as you can see. Well, anyway, I often wonder, when Jesus was on the cross, more of that taboo humor that you've grown to love and expect from the wrong hero. When Jesus was on the cross, did he pretend he was an airplane? You know, like, did he go, hey, I got you, Pontius Pilate. Hey, Peter, I can see your house from here. What else would he say? Oh, well, I was in India for several years of my life. I can do this for 24 hours and 1 minute. Well, you're up there for 3 days, so you're not shitting me, are you? Oh, God, 3 days of this? Oh, if only I had some little balls to squeeze so I could strengthen my wrists a little bit here. Oh, man, this is tedious, I'll tell you. Should have kept my mouth shut about rendering unto Caesar and all that crap. God, my nose is itching. I should have shaved this beard off before all this shit went down. God, I can't even reach it with my tongue. Oh, what am I going to do? Hey, there's the Holy Ghost. Hey, little fella, come down here. Will you scratch that itch for me? To hell with you two. And then the bad priest on the other cross moaning, you know. And it's like the good priest. And the bad priest is, the bad thief is cursing him out. He's saying, you know, hey, you're so great, why don't you get us down from here? And the good thief is saying, now wait a minute, hold your horses. We're thieves, but this guy didn't do nothing. And Jesus turns to him and says, I'll see you in heaven. And it's like, you know, the good thief, what a cynical son of a bitch. He knew that's what that response was going to be. What did he expect? Jesus, no, the bad thief's right, I'm no good. No, but instead it's like, I'll see you in heaven, my brother. All right, solid, it worked, man. I knew that this cross gig wasn't really going to pan out, but I thought maybe I'd make some connections, and it looks like I made the biggest connection of all. It's funny though, because you do this stuff and you don't realize, and you think, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. But the more you're out there, the more people see you, the more things will start coming your way. I mean, you can't just hole up and be a hermit and expect anything to happen to you. You've got to be out there and engaging, and people will like offer you gigs and things like that. But if you just sit there and do nothing, or almost as bad, just churn out the same stuff over and over and over, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just spinning your wheels, boss. So sorry, what can I say? Anyway, there's this preacher down south who carries signs that say, God hates homosexuals. But if you read the small print, it says, but Jesus thinks some of them are kind of cute. And, Jesus, he hung out with 12 guys, and he told Mary Magdalene to take a powder, and he said, he who was without sin cast the first stone. And I don't know. The thing is, this kind of blasphemy might have been considered shocking and controversial and cutting edge in the 90s, the 1890s. But nowadays, in fact, the real blasphemy nowadays is racism. Whereas in the 1890s, it was all pervasive. You wouldn't believe some of this stuff. Ugh. It's enough to make your skin crawl. And of course, the Nazis. See, it was the Nazis that ruined racism for everybody else. I'll tell you. They had to come around. We might have still been, well, if they don't like it, screw them. They can't take a joke, And now it was about the 1950s that racism was beginning to no longer be considered a laughing matter. It's like the childhood of the race in a way. All of these things. Racism, judging a person by surface appearances. It's like there was this woman, I guess she was of Indian ancestry, and I thought, oh wow, cool, an American Indian. Like, they'll be really cool. But she wasn't. She was lousy. She was heckling me. You just never know. And here's these guys, I thought they were from West Virginia. I thought, oh, West Virginia, cool. Like, my kind of people. No, they were heckling me. So you can't always judge a person just by their race or place of origin or anything like that. Especially, you can't prejudge them in a favorable way. It's like, because that's really, really bad. People always talk about, making assumptions about people that are bad assumptions, but you can't really make good assumptions either. You can't say, oh, he's a Jewish guy, he must be smart. Oh, no, don't do that. Or, he's a black guy, I'll bet you he's got soul. Here, play this harmonica. No, that stuff just does not work. If it works at all, it works only on a cultural level, right? And even then, not everybody conforms to the mainstream culture of their subgroup or race or place of national origin. You can't make any assumptions. Like, for example, you might assume that I'm nuts because I'm wearing this mask and I have a hat and it looks like it belonged once to a homeless man, which actually it probably did. And wearing this dress, it's I always say it's a Ralph Lauren, but it's not. It's a Liz Claiborne. I think I found it in front of the Salvation Army in the doorway. And I thought, well, might as well. The whole idea of wearing a dress, it's from an older style of humor. It's really undergraduate humor. I guess a lot of what I do is basically very sophisticated undergraduate humor, which a lot of people don't like because, only about 20% of Americans go to college. No, it's like 50%, but, only 5% go to the really good colleges. like me. So you can't make these abstruse types of references and expect people to get it. And when people hear stuff that they don't understand, they don't like it. Instead of like trying to understand it, or giving someone the benefit of the doubt for not insulting them by pandering to them, or patronizing them, or talking down to them. Instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt and saying, "Well, he's really trying to say something," they'll say, "What is this shit?" It's like, and my motto has always been, I would rather be over your head than beneath your notice. But as it turns out, usually I'm a little bit of both. Well, I'm the wrong hero, and I want the government to outlaw me. That's really the quickest way to a cheap and easy notoriety, howsoever transient. I want the government to outlaw me, and maybe then I could be sold in front of housing projects for $20 a gram. Well, I'm the wrong hero, and on the way over here I went from 0 to 60 in 9 seconds. And now I'm 99 years old. I used to have a Volkswagen, and it's a German car, and whenever I'd start it, it would say, "Warum," which, of course, in German means why. So every time I start this car, it's like I'm being interrogated. Start it up. Why? Well, because I need to go somewhere. Why? Because I got things to do, places to be, people to meet. Why? Because basically, as much as I hate to admit it, I am a social individual, and I thrive on human contact. Why? Well, I mean, I could spend all my time with you, but, you just sit there going like this with that little emblem of yours, and it just doesn't make it somehow. I need to be with people. I spend my time with machines all day long, okay? So, and the thing is, it's a compromise for me to even get in a machine and ask it to take me to see people, all right? I mean, really, if I wanted to see people, I would have people carrying me on a chair to see other people, and that would really be like, keeping in touch with the common people. But no, I compromise. I allow a machine to transport me from point A, where there are no people, and point B, where there are people. Why? Well, because I bought into the whole consensus mentality, that, in order to be an American citizen, you must have a car. And, it's been nothing but constant heartache and misery. And, the Volkswagen, it's a very dependable car, but it costs a lot to repair. And so, every time something goes wrong, which on the average is about maybe once every 3 months, if it's an older car, then, you pay through the nose. It's like, jeepers, this sure gets good mileage. I get 50 miles to the gallon of diesel here. But, on the other hand, I paid $300 for a new water pump. Could have had a guy down in Providence do it for $200 or $180, but no, I had to get it done right away. And my Jiminy, I took it to my regular mechanic, and he charged me $120 extra because he's got high rents, and he can get away with it too, because he's a good mechanic. Yeah, it's this sick relationship we have with our mechanics. Like with a lawyer, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, the guy knows you're no friend of his. He's just like doing a job for you. Basically, what a lawyer does is to defend you in the same skillful manner in which he would defend himself were he to be caught doing the same crime, or were he to be accused of doing the same crime which he did not commit. Of course, then again, there is an old saying in lawyer circles that the lawyer who defends himself has a fool for a client. Well, that may be. It's just like the doctor who tries to perform brain surgery on himself is probably not really all there to begin with, so what's the problem? Let him do it if he wants. Scalpel. Sponge. Suture. That'll take a while. Let's see. Oh, suit yourself. Anyway. This whole thing with mechanics. You don't treat your doctor or your lawyer like he's some chum of yours just because he fixes you up. But with your mechanic, somehow you feel obliged to have some sort of relationship. And sometimes there's a class barrier going on there, you know? I mean, if you're a lower class guy, your mechanic's a lower class guy, you would think that the two of you would be simpatico, but no, not necessarily. You might not be of his tribe. If you don't live in his neighborhood, if you don't know the same people he knows, if you haven't been a steady customer of his for many years, then you're not really of his tribe and he's got you over a barrel and he knows it. And by gum, he's going to take advantage of it, even if you are a fellow member of the lower classes. Or if your mechanic is lower class and you're middle class, well, of course, he can afford it. I'll charge him an extra 50, he won't know. Or if you're lower class and your client, through some hapless mishap, happens to be upper class, well, I'm going to stick that bastard for everything I can get. You know, oh, he's got a Harvard sticker on his car. I bet you he's rich. You know, it's a 15-year-old car. I bet you he's rich. No, he just drives that around because he doesn't want to pay the high insurance cost. Yeah, I'll stick him good. Clutch job? Oh, that'll cost you $600. Yeah. So, of course, there's the middle-class mechanics, like the one I used to go to. Well, being middle class, they figure, hey, you know, he's middle class. I know what he can afford. Maybe it's $100 or $200 more than he'd like to pay, but he's got a credit card. He can just charge it. Yeah. When the bill comes in next month, pay up a little, you know. Don't buy anything for the kids or the wife for about 6 months, and have it all paid up. And then something else will go wrong with the car. He can bring it right back to me, and I'll fix him up. And he's got that credit card, yeah. You don't see very many upper-class mechanics, which is a pity, because, you know, it's a really, I think being a mechanic is a wonderful thing. My father, you know, he's really good at fixing stuff. He's an electrician. He's a pretty good mechanic, too. He's not very book-learned, but, you know, he can fix stuff. It is said of him that he can fix anything. The man who can fix anything. Except maybe the emotional life of his tormented son, who does stand-up comedy in a dress with a mask and a hat because of his father's neglect. Mr. Fix-It, when you're so busy fixing machines, you don't have any time for me. I'm not really that interested in him spending time with me, you know. I just wish he'd call every once in a while. Of course, you know, it would help if I called him, but hey, you know, if he's not going to break down, I'm not going to break down. In that way, perhaps, I am my father's son. So you don't see very many upper-class mechanics unless, you know, they fix race cars or something like that. Or, you know, they work on Mercedes or, I mean, you can just see it, you know. Oh, this is really too bad that you brought your vehicle in here. I just washed my hands. You know, of course, that my consultancy fee is $250 an hour, and that wreck of yours is worth about $300. Why don't you take it down to Greasy Joe's garage? Yes, I think that would be the appropriate place to take it. And you know, people are always raving about, oh, they found this wonderful mechanic. He does fast work, and he's cheap, and he's honest. Always honest, you know. There's always that honest in there. I think even the honest ones, they might be honest to some people, but they make it up on the other people who they don't necessarily know or like or approve of in some way. You know? And it's only human nature, after all. I mean, I charge $200 for, you know, one gig, if I could get away with charging that much, or $2,000. Not to say I'm not worth it, but instead, I basically do most of my shows for nothing. Maybe someone will toss me $20, but they don't guilt trip you. They say, oh, it's coming out of my pocket. Oh, really? Oh, too bad you don't have a bigger pocket. Maybe you can pay me more. But no, I can't be that way. So I say, oh, well, you don't have to pay me 20. You know, if it's slow night, just pay me 10. Then they pay me 5, and, you know, It's like, oh, sorry, I had to pay the other guys more. You know, they're from out of town. Oh, what is with this shit anyway, you know? Oh, they're from out of town. Well, too fucking bad, okay? I'm sorry. You know, let them wash dishes and make an extra 20. I don't know what to say. You know, they're from out of town. Well, give the mendicants a potato and send them on their way. I don't know. It's really something. Well, you know, I'm kind of bored with this material that I'm doing. Some of it, you know, because I've done it at least once, sometimes 2 or 3 times, just in the last 3 days alone. And it doesn't move me, you know? It doesn't move me. I'd rather talk about doing the material than actually doing it. You know, a large part of a comedian's job, if he's to do it at all well, is to scope out the audience before he actually does the set. I mean, you know, because I noticed that a lot of comedians, they all sit hunched together, you know, at these things, or they have their own little dressing room and shit, and they can sort of like schmooze and pal around. Well, you know, I'm not like that. First of all, I don't really want to be with anybody an hour before the show. I need to be by myself. I don't want to have to deal with anybody else beyond the most superficial level of, hello, how are you? Good to see you. I'm glad to see you. Tell me how be you. And tell me one more thing. Are you from Dixie? Hooray for Dixie. And then, you know, then you're doing your act for them. You know, the simple gesture of hello becomes, oh, let me preview part of my act for you. You know, because I got to keep practicing, got to hone that material, hone that. And that's the worst aspect of being a comedian, or at least doing comedy, is that, or being a comic, as the accepted term is among a certain crowd of comedians or comics. You're always like, whenever you say something witty, people assume that it's part of your act, or that you're testing it on them. And well, sometimes you are. And that's the hell of it, you know. Sometimes you just can't help yourself. Somebody says something, you respond with a clever wisecrack, and they get offended. And they say something like, well, I was just trying to be nice. You didn't have to go ahead and make a witticism, which, although it was not at my expense, I will interpret it as being at my expense, so I can lay an enormous guilt trip on you. Oh, boy. Ay, ay, ay. Well, I'm going to pause for a moment here. Ooh. Well, here I am. I'm 39 years old. I have a part-time job. My girlfriend's ready to leave me. Sound like the basis of a successful sitcom? Actually, I think they did something like that, except there was no girlfriend. It was called Get a Life. Oh, jeez, I just cricked my neck here. Well, anyway, it's a real pity, but you got to really scope the audience out. And, you know, when their knuckles drag the ground and they wear tiny little derby hats, 1/8 the size of their heads, and they have these bowl haircuts, and you hear them being referred to with nicknames like Crusher and Knocko, then somehow jokes about Alpha Centauri and Einstein just aren't going to cut it, you know. And yet, you feel guilty because if you try to gear your material towards them, or what you presume in your mind is, you know, what they are like, then either they sense right away that you're sort of lowering the content of your material, and they become incredibly offended, or they still don't get it, you know? Because in this country, somebody said this in the London Spectator, it used to be celebrities were kind of like the town eccentrics or the really well-known figures in a given town, but that their influence spread over the entire culture, which in this case we presume to be Western civilization. But then with James Dean, that sort of thing started to break down, and there came a category of celebrity which we could call niche celebrities. Celebrities who only appeal to a certain, rather limited market. And this is where demographics come in. It's like, there was James Dean, and there was, Elvis was kind of universal. I mean, people at least heard of him. The over 50s might not like him very much, howsoever hard he tried to win their favor by doing syrupy ballads and then letting himself be drafted into the army. But at least they'd heard of him. But then along came someone like James Dean, who him, and the Beatles, and the whole thing just intensified. Maybe the Beatles were the very last entertainment phenomenon that everybody but everybody knew about. Okay, you might have some 80-year-old guy who might not have heard of him for whatever reason. He's kind of out of touch, But pretty much everybody has at least heard of the Beatles. You say Beatles, they say, oh yeah, those guys from England. One of them got shot. They had all these hits. And, I don't much like this here popular music. I like big bands. Yeah, that's the kind of music. I like country and western. That's the genius of the Beatles. They sort of crossed all of the genres. I mean, they had one song that would appeal, at least in theory, to virtually every single segment of the music buying population at that time. They were very, very clever mimics. In many respects, they had a great deal in common with comedians. It's always been one of my most fondly cherished beliefs, howsoever true or untrue it might be, that comedians really want to be musicians, and musicians, for their part, really want to be comedians. Now, you'd think, since that was the case, that musicians and comedians on a bill together would be, surefire. They can work together, they can work against each other, they can work off each other, they can bounce off each other. It just doesn't work that way. There's two totally different and virtually alien territories. What's really cool for a musician is really déclassé for a comedian, and vice versa. As a matter of fact, musicians are really relentlessly into being cool. This superficial patina of sophistication, this sense of belonging, of being part of a very specialized in-group. Whereas comedians, unless they're cult phenomena, they make their whole livelihood by appealing to the broadest possible segment of the audience. And so, by definition, a comedian cannot really be cool, and in that definition, that sense of the term, and be widely popular. It's not really possible. And I hate to say it, but getting back to this whole thing about niche celebrities, you don't know, you cannot take for granted that there is any one thing that everybody will know about anymore. Maybe that was never the case. There was always going to be some people who perhaps have recently arrived to this country who weren't aware that George Washington was the first president. But at the very least, you can assume that most people would be familiar with the things you were talking about. But now everything is incredibly superficial and ephemeral. I mean, you can make jokes about, say, the blizzard, and get a big laugh. Blizzard isn't even a good example, because we do get one of those every once in a while. It's a recurring thing. You can take your blizzard material from '78 and rework it. And no, it would be something more like, I don't know, I can't even remember anything that happened recently that, sending troops to Bosnia. You can do Bosnia jokes for maybe about 3 weeks, and then, or whenever that war is over. 3 weeks after that war is over and our involvement has ended, that'll be it. You can't do the Bosnia material anymore, any more than you can do the Vietnam stuff now. It just won't work. It's like memory is, the half-life of people's memories is getting shorter and shorter. When they went up the periodic table of the elements and they got to the radioactive ones, they came first to uranium, and it had a half-life of, hundreds of thousands of years, and then good old Mr. Plutonium, and that has a half-life of slightly fewer hundreds of thousands of years. And then they go all the way up to like Americium and Californium and Einsteinium and Fermium and element number 103. And these had half-lives of like half a second. And this is what is happening in American culture. We're going up the periodic table of radioactive topics, and their half-lives are getting shorter and shorter. Of course, there is the trial of the century. I don't know how they can call it that when it only takes up like maybe 2 years of our collective national consciousness. I mean, who's going to even remember the damn thing 30 years from now? Well, people will remember because it lasted so long. But there are, the Menendez brothers, they got the shaft, They were the trial of the century. And then, no. And what about all the other trials of the century? Leopold and Loeb, those bums, they're has-beens. Let's see, Clarence Darrow versus William Jennings Bryan, the Darwin thing, Scopes trial. What about Lizzie Borden? Huh? Lizzie Borden, remember her? Huh? Who her? She was a hot potato 100 years ago, but, well, people still talk about her, but, to that degree, she still reverberates across the mystic chords of memory. To quote from the title of a book by Michael Kamen, which I read and can barely remember one word of, but maybe I'm like taking a great deal of this previous material from that very book, or at least taking some of the ideas and adapting them to this presentation. And I don't realize it. Who knows? That's the way things work. You read a comic book in 1968, and 15 or 16 years later, one of the little things in it comes back to you, and you use it as the basis of a bit or something, and wow, things just like this. It's like those diagrammatic maps you see of the Earth's surface. There's like the topsoil, which is like 2 inches deep, and that's the ephemeral events of the day. And there's like all this stuff right beneath it, the bones of conquistadors and Indian arrowheads and stuff, dinosaur bones and the Earth's molten core. And if you want to fuck with that, good luck.